And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
All right, welcome back to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown. Joining me, as always, CP Christian Page. My man, CP, how we doing?
Doing well. A little tired, but I'm doing well.
You are probably a little jet lagged, maybe. I don't know. Dallas was fun, though.
Oh, it was awesome. Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, really cool place to hang out. Yeah, if you got a few days like I did for the Labor Day weekend, it's a really fun place. A lot of stuff to do. Really good food.
Oh, I bet, man. I've been to Texas once. Houston was where I went, and just the barbecue was unreal. It was a good time for sure. I was really jealous of you being out there. But you were at the Auburn, Oregon game. How was that?
It was awesome. That was my first time in the Dallas, Arlington, Fort Worth area, but my first time, going to the AT&T Stadium. And it just, when you walk into that stadium, it just opens in front of you and you're just in awe. I've been to the Mercedes Dome in Atlanta last year for the Auburn-Washington game. So I guess to carry out the tradition, I went to the opening game here at AT&T Stadium, and it's just incredible. But, just kind of outside, I guess, of talking specifically about the game, the crowd was awesome. Just everything around it was really cool. And you could tell, it was kind of disappointing about the college football schedule, Auburn, Oregon, it's a marquee matchup, however you look at it. But that was it seemed like the only one, especially compared to last year when you had a lot of really high-level games coming into the season. But Auburn and Oregon was the headliner for a little bit. Those first couple quarters, it looked like Oregon was going to take the game and just run with it. They left so many plays on the field, and Auburn just could not really move the football. They couldn't stop Oregon, which was really surprising. And we talked about Oregon's offensive line, 153 combined starts. I think probably the most experienced offensive line in college football. They were holding their own in those first couple quarters. Mario Cristobal and company did a great job game planning in that first half. They were kind of giving Herbert a moving pocket and also with the running backs as well. They just kind of collapsed in the second half. Auburn, clued it in on defense and figured out what they were doing. And even though, freshman quarterback for Auburn, Bo Nix, threw a couple picks in the first half, he came back and led Auburn to 2 really solid drives there at the end. And, of course, that touchdown to Seth Williams at the end. But it was a really fun atmosphere and a lot of really good players in that game.
I'll tell you what, man, that was a fun game to watch. I rewatched it yesterday. Now that I'm thinking about it, before the show, I was like, what game did I watch yesterday also? And that was the game. Just wow. Bo Nix with the poise and the composure at the end of the game to make that touchdown pass and really win that game. It was a 26-yard pass. Oregon, again, came out flat in the second half, really came out flat like Florida State, if we want to talk about teams that came out flat in the second half. But just staying on top of Oregon and Auburn's game, I thought Herbert looked good. But really the player that I was impressed with was Whitlow, the Auburn running back, and then, of course, Derrick Brown. Derrick Brown just absolutely demolished that offensive line. He was unstoppable.
And that's the thing with Derrick Brown. Look, he's not going to sit here and put up gaudy statistics. And, we always sit there and kind of jump on people that deal with, box score scouts and everything like that. Derrick Brown had 3 tackles. That was it. He didn't really record. I don't think he recorded a quarterback pressure, didn't record a sack, tackle for loss or whatever. But you just talk about, taking on double teams and moving the pocket. There's one play where Oregon's around the goal line and he busts and just puts the center on his back. And then he opens up a play for KJ Britt, the Auburn linebacker, to come up and get a tackle for loss. So, for KJ Britt, he gets the tackle and the tackle for loss. And Derrick Brown's just like, hey, I'm just doing my job. And
right.
when scouts, that's the plays that they drool over. So wherever you want to align Derrick Brown, he is just such an explosive beast. And again, he's my number 2 player going into the season this year. My number 1 is Jerry Jeudy. He also did his thing as well when Alabama played Duke. But Derrick Brown just tore everybody up on a very solid Oregon offensive line, and we can circle back to them later. But you're talking about Detarvius Whitlow for Auburn. The guy created so much. I mean, Oregon's defensive line actually did some damage to Auburn's offensive line. Jordan Scott's a really solid nose guard, and he actually controlled Caleb Kim, the Auburn center. But Detarvius Whitlow, just the ability to create a lot in space when his running lanes get really muddy. Detarvius Whitlow put the team on his back. And then, he kind of got a little winded there at the end, and you saw kind of Auburn kind of freak out a little bit. Gus Malzahn didn't really know what to call. But Detarvius Whitlow, I think you should definitely circle his name because he definitely put the team on his back and really got Auburn in that rhythm to put points on the board.
Yeah, and it's one of those games where when you look back at it, I know it's week 1, but we're going to look back at this game and we'll probably forget about it. You won't because you're an Auburn fan, but we'll probably forget about this game, and then we'll go back, watch Herbert, watch Derrick Brown, and we'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right. Bo Nix, true freshman, 9-second fourth quarter comeback, and it was such a fun game. Another player that really stood out, obviously I really like Shane Lemieux, the offensive guard. I know you were talking about him last week in your college football preview, but another player was Johnny Johnson, the wide receiver. I was so curious with Oregon who was going to step up for Dylan Mitchell and that offense. And, now that Dylan Mitchell's gone and everything like that. And Johnny Johnson came out 7 receptions, 100 yards. And this was a guy that just in this game alone basically caught half of the receptions he had last year. He only had 17 receptions. And then 2 years ago, he had 21 receptions. So he's like a third of the way through of his production from 2 years ago, halfway through last year. He's listed at 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's a junior. I thought he looked pretty good. I don't know, I can't see every route that he ran, and I don't know if you were necessarily paying attention to him, but it did seem like there were times that Auburn's defensive backs were trailing him and just couldn't really make anything happen.
Yeah, and Oregon, I can't remember how many guys that they lost at that receiver position. One from being for, graduation or just foregoing their senior eligibility, like Dylan Mitchell, their leading receiver last year, like you noted. But there's also just a lot of injuries coming in. So, somebody had to step up. And he found his way. So Johnson found his way and took advantage of some opportunities, and he put themselves in a win. I mean, I was very impressed with really just the individual part of Oregon's offense. Like I said, I think the play calling and just the game management was really strange for Mario Cristobal's crew. I mean, they called a timeout on the very first play of the game right after the kickoff, and then there was some weird timeout management going on later on. But, Johnson and C.J. Verdell was, golly, he's so fast.
Yeah,
Jacob Breland, kind of made a couple plays. And, the offensive line did their thing, and a couple players on defense as well. But you talked about Herbert. Herbert has all the talent in the world. And just watching him in person, the guy has an extremely live arm. He can make every throw. There was one play where I think he got a little lucky on the touchdown, but it was just a ballsy throw because he was kind of getting out of pressure on the left side. He gets hit in the lower body by Nick Coe and just delivers a strike to the other side, the right side of the field. And then I forget who the receiver was or the tight end. He boxed out Javaris Davis for Auburn, who really did not have a fighter's chance at all. And then he gets the touchdown. And it just showed you of all the talent in the world that Justin Herbert has. And they got banged up a little bit there at the end of the game, and Oregon tried to get him in, but couldn't really get that on that one of their last drives. But Oregon has some talent, and by no means is this team done. I mean, I would not be surprised if we see this team really push for a playoff position. I know the same thing was probably said last year when Auburn beat Washington and Atlanta, but I think this Oregon team, led by a lot better of a quarterback with Justin Herbert than Jake Browning, the sky is still the limit. And I think a very winnable Pac-12. I know, we talked about Utah, about their defense and what, they can go forward with Kyle Whittingham, but I think this Oregon team is still the team to beat in the Pac-12.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they've got the team with, they've got Nevada, Montana the next 2 weeks. So, I mean, they should be fine there. They got to go to Stanford, but we'll talk about KJ Costello here in a few moments, and I'll talk about Northwestern and Stanford, a game that I watched this past weekend. But, they got to go to Stanford, which should be a winnable game, though. They got to play Cal and Colorado. They got to go to Washington. But outside of that, I mean, They don't have to play Utah unless it's the Pac-12 championship. They got to go to Arizona State. They got to go to USC. But again, I'm not too worried about their schedule, and it wouldn't surprise me if they ended up going 11-1. But I will say this: if, like you mentioned, Mario Cristobal, if he can't get his offense in sync in the second half, and if he can't get the clock management and guys where they need to be later on in the year, it's going to hurt them in a game eventually somewhere down the line, and they could very well, rather than be 11-1, they could very well be 10-2. So we'll see how it goes for them. But that was a fun game to watch. If you guys haven't checked it out, definitely watch it, simply because you got the headliners like Justin Herbert and Derrick Brown, but you've also got some guys like Whitlow and Johnny Johnson, some other guys that we're talking about, as well as like Shane Lemieux and even Troy Dye, the linebacker from Oregon, who is freakishly athletic, great range, a player that I like as well. But I want to talk about a game I watched, Northwestern versus Stanford at Stanford. Holy cow, was this a snooze fest. I didn't watch it live. I watched it yesterday. I watched 3 games yesterday, and I'll tell you what, Stanford is one of the most boring teams in the country. And I think a lot of it's because you've got KJ Costello, but they just will not let him. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because they don't have, Arcega-Whiteside anymore. Or, I mean, like, it's crazy to think about, but like they lost almost 70% of their receiving yards from last year. They lost their top 3 receivers. You have Bryce Love as well, the running back, but they lost almost 2,500 receiving yards last year alone. So maybe that's why KJ Costello wasn't necessarily taking a bunch of deep shots. Now, granted, he left the game early. Looks like a head injury. Don't know if he's going to play this coming week. But at the same time, like, every single throw was like a to the flats, a check down. It just seemed like every single time he was doing something, it was a dump down to a running back, or it was a check down to a tight end or a receiver that was running a crossing pattern. I'll say this: Cameron Scarlett looked pretty good as far as, running back wise. He had 22 carries for 97 yards, but I don't know. Northwestern kind of scares me. Their offense is god awful. TJ Green, he didn't finish the game. He was 6-10 for 62 yards. Bowser, the freshman running back from last year, does not even look like the same guy this year. Again, Stanford's defense played pretty well, but one guy I will say for Northwestern that looked good. Obviously, they have Patty Fisher, the linebacker, who's a tackling machine, but Joe Graziano, senior defensive lineman, probably could play as a 5 technique, could play as a 3 technique or a 4-eye. Will probably plug and play all over the defensive line for a defense. But at 6'4", listed at 275, this guy is kind of, to me, similar to Zach Allen in a way from last year. Now, I'm not saying he's like the same type of talent, but I think like what you see with him is what you kind of get. And he was pretty productive. He made some pretty good plays on Walker Little, who also ended up getting dinged up. So, again, what a snooze fest it was. And really, I want this game simply for the All-22 because I want to see Walker Little versus Graziano in the trenches a little bit more closely because the broadcast angle does not do that game justice.
No, something needs to do it justice. I mean, when you look at the schedule, you just kind of know that was going to be kind of a snooze fest and just kind of like that smash mouth football. I mean, with David Shaw and Pat Fitzgerald, that's kind of like the style that they like to play. But I'm with you. Going back to Costello and just the game plan with them, we know the guy has an incredible arm. I mean, he has a ton of arm strength, and I know his delivery is a little funky. But, yeah, maybe it is just the absence of Arcega-Whiteside and a couple of others where it's just like, well, we're just going to kind of take what the defense gives us. But it's like, no, you have one of the better quarterbacks in college football, and it just kind of sucks just to watch and be like, you have a lot of potential. Why aren't you taking advantage of it? And so, yeah, I think that's going to be something that, I mean, of course, Costello has to get back healthy. I assume it's a concussion. You said, he got banged up in the chin. I don't know if it's concussion or something with his, I don't like his chin or something like that. But, going forward, I hope they utilize Costello to the best of his ability because Stanford's not going to go anywhere, even though I know I said, the Pac-12 isn't a special conference, but from an offensive standpoint, they can put up a lot more points, even if Stanford's defense is doing their job. I mean, I don't know. Can Stanford put up 20, 24 points a night? I'm not sure.
Right. No, and I mean, they only put up 17. They only had one offensive touchdown, and their offensive touchdown came in the second quarter where they drove 15 plays, 90 yards, an 8-minute drive. And I was sitting there and I'm like, okay. Like there's like, it's fun. I like watching football like that, but I was expecting like KJ Costello to kind of air it out. The touchdown was a 2-yard pass from KJ Costello. It's like, what are we doing here? Like the guy's got a strong arm. Let him throw it deep. Let's see what we got. But I mean, again, it's week 1. Maybe they weren't trying to put out the playbook. We'll see. But Cameron Scarlett certainly was a player to watch. Obviously, Walker Little, he got dinged up. It's worth monitoring there. Again, Costello got injured. So I would definitely watch the game, but bring a pillow, a blanket, and be prepared for a quick nap somewhere in that part of the game. But I know you said you watched Houston, Oklahoma. Obviously, we got to start with Jalen Hurts. I mean, unbelievable, looking like Cam Newton out there. Just absolutely lit it up. What was your take from that game from the parts that you watched?
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts is everything that he's hyped up to be. I mean, we knew what kind of a special athlete he was, but I mean, just watching him, and I know like Houston's not this dominating defense. Of course, Ed Oliver there last year, and they have a couple pieces. I mean, the cupboard was not left bare on that defense, even with the absence of Oliver. But just seeing what Oklahoma was able to do, and Jalen Hurts especially, being able to sit in the pocket, and when not, taking off with his legs. And he is a cerebral football player. I'm not going to say he's the greatest passer out there or the smartest football player out there, but just based on, you always hear about off the field, how mature of a person he is. You can see that carry over to the football field. You can he plays with that demeanor. And I know I always say sometimes it's hard to measure the football intelligence just by looking at it on film. But when somebody has it or really accentuates that, you can see it plain as day. And I think you can see that with Jalen Hurts, whether it's throwing to CeeDee Lamb or whoever it may be. Jalen Hurts in Oklahoma, they're going to go far this year. And I was really impressed with him. Even Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl executive director, gave him a shout out. He said his Senior Bowl stock's going up. So that'd be really cool. I think Jalen Hurts in the Senior Bowl environment, that would be great to see because he still needs to kind of work on some mechanical things and maybe reading defenses overall. But even just with, one game under Lincoln Riley, I think Hurts has matured as a football player. And again, carrying that over from off the field, on the field. This guy, I think he's the real deal. Is he an NFL quarterback? I'm not sure yet, but I think he could be worth the risk come April.
Yeah, oh no, for sure. I mean, I think just after this game, unless it's an absolute debacle from here on out, which I don't see happening, but he absolutely earned himself, I think, a draftable grade from anybody across the board. And if you say he's not a draftable player, then you're lying to yourself because, in my opinion, Alabama's offense has always kind of been, I don't want to say like one-dimensional, but it's kind of been one-dimensional where you get with Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma and they spread it out. They do today's stuff in today's NFL stuff in their offense. They do a lot of motion, a lot of jet stuff and stuff underneath and RPOs and the play actions and everything that you need out of a quarterback, they do. And that's why we've seen Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray go first overall. And I'm not going to lie, man, if Jalen Hurts does this, I don't know if he'll do it every week, but if he does this for 10 games, 11 games out of the year, how do we not say he's not the first overall pick? He was 20 of 23, 332 passing with 3 touchdowns, and then he added 16 carries for almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns there. He absolutely crushed that game. And he was playing pissed off. He was playing with a chip on his shoulder. And I just would not be surprised if we see Oklahoma continue to do this throughout the most of the season.
Oh, yeah, there's no question. And now, with the losing Marquise Brown last year, you see CeeDee Lamb, 2 catches, 46 yards and touchdown. But Charleston Rambo, 3 catches, 105 yards and a touchdown. I think he's a redshirt sophomore, so we'll still have to see based on, if he wants to take that next step. But it's just another Oklahoma receiver that steps up to the plate and takes advantage of the situation. So it was good to see that even though only with 3 receptions that Hurts is already gaining a rapport with some new faces to us from a draft perspective. And Oklahoma just continues to pump out those skill position players. So Trey Sermon, another one that had a really solid game at running back. So Oklahoma, offensively, they're the real deal and one of the best teams in college football.
Are we worried at all about CeeDee Lamb? 2 receptions, 46 yards, a touchdown. I mean, he scored a big touchdown, but outside of that, he was kind of held in check for parts of that game. Is that more so on Hurts just not really finding him, or maybe it was more so coverages of – I'm assuming he's seeing double coverage. I don't see why he wouldn't. He's probably locked in man with a safety over the top almost every single time, or there's a lot of zone coverages where linebackers are getting to, hook the curl and everything else like that. So are we at least concerned at all about CeeDee Lamb after one game, or should we just take a step back and say, hey, it's week one, he'll be fine?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a little bit of both. I mean, that's definitely something to take note of and just watch it specifically. If you're talking about, getting the all 22 tape and watching it there, or just going back and kind of watching the game and not in just, the normal spectator element like I was. I'll put it like I was on Sunday night. So, I think that'll be interesting to see. I'll definitely take note of that and go back and look and see, what was the quote unquote problem with his, I guess, lack of production, even though, he did have that touchdown, a couple catches. But, like Isaiah Johnson with Houston, a few years or last year, I guess, and then William Jackson, they produced decent defensive backs in that area. So it may have just been, talent versus talent. And I guess Houston got a little bit and CeeDee Lamb punched back a little bit. But that's definitely something to take note of that I'm going to go back and watch and see what the case is.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I will one more name before we move on to my Michigan State Spartans. But Oklahoma, and I don't think a lot of people know this, they do have another K. Murray on their team. It's not Kyler Murray. It is Kenneth Murray. And I watched him in the summer, and I'll tell you what, he flashed a lot to me on the tape then. He was super rangy, super athletic, fast, instinctive. I mean, it really just, he showed it. Now, there were times that he left his feet when he was tackling. He would over pursue. But overall, like you see the tools there that are there to kind of work with. And he's built almost like bigger for a linebacker, kind of like a Tremaine Edmonds almost. And he comes out against Houston, 13 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. He was all over the field for Oklahoma, as well as Ronnie Perkins, their defensive lineman. He's a sophomore. He had 7 tackles and a sack and 2 tackles for loss. Those were 2 guys that really flashed. They should be kind of like the nucleus to that defense. We'll see. But in that front 7, those are 2 guys that are certainly names to watch. I don't know if they caught your eye at all when you were watching the game on Saturday.
Yeah, just a little bit. And with Murray, yeah, he is kind of I guess he's fortunate in the sense, but, that he shares the same initials as Kyler did. But that shouldn't just, be his reason that he gets recognition, because the guy is a stud. Like, for all the details you said, it's easy to get just fixated on Oklahoma's offense, and for good reason. I mean, they're very fun to watch, but Oklahoma, every now and then they produce a couple of defenders that are worth noting. So definitely when you're watching, the ascension of Jalen Hurts and the rest of that offense and the Oklahoma program itself, keep your eyes on both sides of the football, because they do have some playmakers on defense.
Yeah, they really do. They'll be a lot of fun to watch. I'm excited to watch them. Not so much against UCLA when they got to go there. I'm more so excited for when they obviously play Texas. I'm excited to see what they do against West Virginia, who struggled, I think, against James Madison. It was 20-13, the final on that game. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm kind of curious how Austin Kendall looked. But also, like, what will Oklahoma look like against TCU, who's got a great defense, it seems like, every single year. So we'll see what happens there. But I want to move forward to a team that's got a really great defense, and that's Michigan State. Their defense was lights out against Tulsa, and I get it. I know Tulsa's not a world beater, but and by the way, I mean, Michigan State took the sloppiest way ever to get to 28 points, but overall, their defense was the talk of the town, and they did not allow a single rushing yard in this game. They allowed negative 73 rushing yards, which is incredible. And that, if you take away Zach Smith, who had negative 32, that's not right. I'm sorry. The stat there is wrong. But Zach Smith had negative 32, the quarterback. If you take that away, between their 2 running backs, Brooks and Taylor, they had 13 carries for negative 1 yard. So
wow.
I've said this time and time again to my buddies and everything else. I think Michigan State's front 7 is better than it was when they had the no-fly zone. They had guys like, Darqueze Dennard. They had Trey Waynes in their secondary. Those were defenses that had, Shaq Lawson, Darius Harris. What's his name? It's totally on the tip of my tongue. I forget it. But wow, how am I blanking on that name? Max Bola, excuse me. They had the Bola brothers through there, the trio of brothers over like a 6-year span. But regardless, they had so much talent, but I just don't believe that team is as good defensively as this defense, because you've got Kenny Willekes, who crushed it. He had 1.5 sacks. He had a safety. He had a touchdown. You've got Joe Bacci, who had 7 tackles. And again, I've mentioned him before, quietly back-to-back 100 tackle seasons in the last 2 years. Antoine Simmons, who is finally living up to that 4-star, 5-star moniker that he was coming out of Ann Arbor Skyline or Pioneer. I believe it was Ann Arbor Skyline, which is like right across the street from University of Michigan. But either way, he goes to East Lansing. Was it kind of an athlete, running back, linebacker type of guy? He's been playing linebacker for state the last 2-3 years. He's got 6 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. He was all over the field for Michigan State on Friday night. But then you've got the I'm going to butcher a name here. It's a podcast that I have to do it on. The Panasiak brothers or something. Either way, I mean, they're just, no matter how you look at it, that defensive line is stacked. And I didn't even get to like Raekwon Williams yet, who also had a great game. So this is a team that at 28-7, they took a sloppy way to get the 28 points. Their offense scares the crap out of me in the worst way, because I have no idea if they're going to be able to run the football at all. Connor Hayward had 15 carries for 43 yards. Brian Lewerke added 34 yards on the ground. And the backup, Jefferson and Collins, combined, they had 15 carries for 25 yards. So I'm very concerned about this offense. Their offensive line is atrocious. I don't know if this team is going to be that serious to compete against in the Big Ten, just simply because that offense is holding them back. But Mark D'Antonio was very upset today in his press conference, said they've got to get better offensively or they're not going to achieve what they want to achieve. So we'll see there. But 28-7. I don't know if you even watched this game. I know, again, like you were out of town, you were doing a bunch of things in Dallas and everything else and watching other games. But that's my take on Michigan State. I'm scared shitless about this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's been the question mark for now, I guess, the past 2 years. You know, you thought, generally speaking, that Brian Lewerke was going to take that big step forward. But even if he did, it doesn't sound like he has the running game to take his back on, or even the offensive line up front. So I think those are 2 big question marks, just taking your word for it. But yeah, just looking at their schedule, I was looking it up. Western Michigan next week, then have Arizona State at home, go to Northwestern, a team that we were talking about. Offensively, they have problems too, but defensively, they're pretty stout. So, the pot and kettle situation there potentially. And then you have Indiana, but the month of October at Ohio State, at Wisconsin, you get a bye week in Penn State. So I think we'll really see the true identity of Michigan State and where the season's headed in October. And I think those will be, a trio of crucial games, not just necessarily from, the season college football standpoint, but just from a draft evaluation standpoint, because I don't know I always love watching Michigan State film, because I still feel like you always get a really solid trench battle. I know you're talking about the offensive line is a little shaky this year, but I feel like just from a physical standpoint, especially when you're looking at games like against Wisconsin, those are always really fun games, because I love just watching the trench play with defensive line and offensive line. I always think Michigan State and whoever their opponent is, they always bring it. So I think those trio of games right there, once we can get our hands on that film, is going to be really exciting, not from a scoreboard or production standpoint, but exciting just from a physical football standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see what happens, though. I mean, I try not to think too far ahead on Michigan State, and I do the same thing with like the Lions and everything else, because it's so early in the year, and it's like they can make changes. And like we talked about in the pre-show, Michigan State struggles, it seems like, every year with their offense in that first game. They struggled last year against Utah State. They just come out rusty. They come out slow, but it's kind of inexcusable at times when you got teams like Ohio State putting up 78 points. You got Rutgers I think Rutgers even put up like 70 points. It's just crazy. And then you've got teams like Georgia State going into Tennessee and putting up over 30 points as 15-point underdogs. So it's like, come on, Mark D'Antonio, spend some money on your offense, get it together, and get the right coaches in place, and stop paying your friends and start doing this thing the right way and get the right guys in for the job, because, the coaches that he have in place right now are just not the right guys. And it's shown consistently over the last 3 or 4 years. The offense continues to get worse and worse as they continue to lean on the running game 40 times a game. So we'll see what happens. I'm definitely nervous. Hopefully they come out against Western and just light them up 56-0, but we'll see what happens. But I know we talked about Joe Burrow a little bit, the LSU quarterback. You watched LSU briefly over the weekend, and you have some thoughts on Joe Burrow, and I've got thoughts on another quarterback. So why don't you give me some takes on Joe Burrow and what you saw, because you seem like you're pretty high on him.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a lot of, low expectations for Joe Burrow, and I was kind of there too. He had a lot of hype being the grad transfer from Ohio State coming into LSU last year, and he was just average. He was kind of a ho-hum quarterback, not really getting the job done. But I think this year, just from a physical standpoint and maybe a little bit between the ears, seems like he's taken that next step forward. Yes, he played Georgia Southern this past weekend. Yes, they were a 10-win team a year ago. But just watching him from – seems just like an intelligence standpoint, picking up, second reads and, making improvised plays. All you have to do, really, you turn on the game film here, just watch the first drive, and you can see how much of a player he's improved. Because even against, teams of this caliber like Georgia Southern last year, he was still struggling. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, and he really wants to emphasize passing the ball. Last year, Joe Burrow would still pass 30, 32, 33 times a game, but there was no consistency. In this game, he was 23 of 27, 278 yards, 5 touchdowns in the first half, no picks. So I think going forward, Joe Burrow showed a lot of physical, making big plays with his arms, making plays on his feet, and then still keeping his eyes downfield. Again, turn on that first drive. You can definitely see him making those improv plays. And then on I believe it was the final play of that drive on the touchdown throw. It was a read option. He read it right. It was an RPO, I should say. And then he dials it in between. It looks like the safety in the corner. Maybe it was even the linebacker, but puts it in a very tight window with the utmost confidence. Made a couple of those throws on that drive and throughout the rest of the game. But Joe Burrow, big test coming up this week versus Texas. I know on Thursday's show we'll get in more to a preview, but I think Burrow versus Texas, if he's going to improve as potentially a pro quarterback, I'm not saying he's there yet by any means, but I definitely love to see the improvement from Burrow. And maybe just LSU actually has a quarterback that they can win because of. Not win with, but win because of. And hopefully Joe Burrow is that quarterback, because I think the offensive line's pretty solid, and Edwards-Helaire, the running back, is a solid runner as well. So I think they have enough pieces on offense. We know their defense is really solid, led by Grant Delpit. So I think Joe Burrow showed a lot of improvements, even against Georgia Southern, that may get him a little buzz going into maybe halfway through the season. But again, circle this Texas game this weekend. We'll see what Burrow's made of.
Yeah, big early season test. I really can't wait for Saturday's games, and I can't wait for Thursday to preview it, because we'll have Texas A&M and Clemson on the docket. We'll have Texas, LSU on there. I think Michigan Army could be a sneaky good game if Army can get it together and actually, get after Michigan. But you've got Nebraska, Colorado, which I think should be a good afternoon game. There's quite a few games out there that should be pretty good. Nevada, Oregon, I think will be a fun one for a late Pac-12, but a late night game. You've got Stanford, USC, Cal, Washington for Pac-12 after dark. So, guys, it's going to be a lot of fun. But the quarterback I wanted to get into briefly, and we'll wrap this up, was Nathan Rourke out of Ohio. I've been watching this guy for the last 2 years, and he's been kind of my under-the-radar guy. And last night on Twitter, I was breaking down the Rhode Island game and just watching what he was doing. And, again, I can't really tell from the broadcast angle, but because you can't really see exactly where his head is kind of moving, whereas all 22 you can. But just some of the throws that he made. Now, I don't think he's perfect by any means, but Ohio's got Pitt this week, and Pitt lost against Virginia in week 1. And I'm not saying Ohio is going to come out and light up Pitt. They probably won't, because Narduzzi's one hell of a coach, and Pitt's not Rhode Island. But Nathan Rourke could be a difference maker, and I'm writing about it. Not right now, but I started it last night. I'll write a little bit more about it tonight. But Nathan Rourke is a guy, quarterback from Ohio, to pay attention to. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. He's got the physical tools, I think, maybe not the strongest arm. Of course, give it to me, the guy that never picks the quarterbacks with the strong arms, a.k.a. Ryan Finley. But Nathan Rourke, he was 16 to 22 on Saturday, 188 yards. He had 10 carries for 75 yards and a touchdown. They like to run a lot of RPOs, zone read with him, where he's basically reading that edge rusher. And if he's biting inside, he's keeping it and he's going and cutting upfield. Or if the edge rusher stays, he's going to give it and it's going to lead to positive yards. But he fits, I think, today's NFL. Some would consider him maybe undersized because he's not super tall, but that really doesn't matter anymore. Again, I like his arm. I don't think he can make every single throw as far as like the arm strength. Now, he has shown that he can throw it down the sideline and drop it into a bucket. But really what was standing out to me was him going through his progressions. The pre-snap reads are there. He's reading defenses left and right. But then post-snap, he's beating teams with pump fakes and his eyes and moving safeties off the ball, moving linebackers to jump underneath routes, and that's opening up post routes and slant patterns and everything else. And it's a lot of fun to watch. Nathan Rourke just against Rhode Island in itself was a big step forward from last year. And a fun fact on him, last 2 years he's had 40 rushing touchdowns, which leads college football. So,
wow.
And he's a fun guy to watch. So if you haven't watched him, check him out. Check out Joe Burrow as well, Jalen Hurts, and keep an update on KJ Costello as we start focusing on other quarterbacks not named Tua, not named Justin Herbert, and not named Jake Fromm. So I don't have anything else. We could be here all day talking week one. I don't want to get into Tennessee losing. I don't care about Florida State enough. They're not back. Willie Taggart's overrated. So I don't have anything else. I don't know what you have left to say for week one, but I'm good. I'm ready for Thursday to talk week two.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The only thing I'm going to add, Jonathan Taylor, when they played Wisconsin, when they played South Florida this weekend, I believe Thursday, Friday, I can't remember the exact date, 16 carries, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 catches, 48 yards, and 2 touchdowns. How about it? They found a way to get him involved in the receiving game. I don't care if it was only 2 catches. He found a way to really push forward with that and get in the end zone twice in the receiving game. So definitely that was one of those weaknesses, definitely in the sense of being a victim of that offensive style. But it's good to see Jonathan Taylor get involved in the receiving game because, again, that was one of the things we circled coming into the season where that's what he needed to really improve on. He kind of wanted to solidify potential first-round stock. So good for Jonathan Taylor in Wisconsin to get him involved in the receiving game.
Yeah, mad props to them. He's going to be a fun study all year long because Wisconsin's offense is just – that offensive line is just so fun to watch. Led by Tyler, what's his name? I
already forgot. Biotish.
Biotish, that's it. Biotish, Tyler Biotish. Can't wait to watch more of Jonathan Taylor. And I'll tell you what, even though he's not catching a ton of passes out of the backfield over the course of his career, really doesn't matter because Devin Singletary, throughout the preseason, caught 15 passes in 3 games for the Buffalo Bills. So anything can happen once you get to the next level. So we'll see what happens with Jonathan Taylor. We'll get more into week 2. We'll actually give you guys – I'm calling it right now, so do your homework on it, CP. But we're going to do 10 game picks to make up from week 1. So we're going to do 10 game picks against the spread. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe you don't want to do against the spread, but I really don't care. So that's all we got for you guys. Be sure to smash the follow button as always @_Christian page for CP, at Russ NFL Draft. I almost forgot my own Twitter handle. Other than that, you guys have a great Tuesday evening, a great Wednesday morning. We'll talk to you on Thursday, and we'll get you ready for week 2 of college football. Until next time, this is Cover 1, the NFL Draft Podcast.